Hey listeners, normally I'd say it's Jim, but this time it's Jim, Eugene, and Diane. Yep, it's true. I got the Makovecs here with me from the American Bee Journal by way of the Data Company in Hamilton, Illinois. Nice to have somebody sitting in the bee yard with me. Say hi.
Hey everybody. Yeah, it's nice to be here. I'm just sitting here watching a yellow jacket go by, of all things, but we're sitting in a busy bee yard, and it's nice to be here in Ohio, in Worcester. I learned how to pronounce it.
Yeah, Worcester, Ohio. Diane, you're off mic, but say something with force and authority.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. This is really nice sitting out here with Jim in this bee yard. Bees are a-buzzing, it's a beautiful sunny day, and we're happy to be here with you.
I'm glad to have the company. Listeners, I just want to talk to the Makovecs about what it's like to be responsible for a publication that has to come out every month since sometime in the 1800s. That's a lot of months.
Welcome to Honey Bee Obscura, brought to you by Growing Planet Media, the producers of the Beekeeping Today podcast. Join Jim 2, your guide through the complexities, the beauty, the fun, and the challenges of managing honeybees. Jim hosts fun and interesting guests who take a deep dive into the intricate world of honeybees. Whether you're a seasoned beekeeper or just getting started, get ready for some plain talk that'll delve into all things honeybees.
Eugene, how in the world does someone in your position decide to come to being a national beekeeping magazine editor? What was your circuitous path?
Circuitous is actually the first thing that comes to mind when you say that, because I didn't come here naturally, I guess I would say. I did get a journalism degree years ago, but I guess I didn't want to write obits for a few years and things like that and work my way up the ladder, just maybe too lazy for that. But I had another interest, which was printing, and I got into the printing industry. So spent most of my career working for printing industries, mostly in labeling. But at some point I took up beekeeping and got involved in organizations and took on a newsletter for the state organization, which was a great thing because it forced me to go to twice annual conferences where I got to listen to and meet people like Jim too and other renowned speakers and learn a great deal. I also met vendors like the Data Company, and at some point or other I kind of thought, if either of these magazine jobs opens up, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and just see what happens. And somehow the ABJ job got by me. Joe Graham retired, and I happened to be talking to one of the Data family about a year later, and I mentioned something about it. I wish I'd known that job was coming open, and he looked at me and said, I kind of wish I'd known you were interested. And as it happened, about 2 to 3 weeks later, the current editor of the journal, Kirsten Trainer, stepped down, moved on to other things, and I got an email one morning saying, when can you come talk to us? And within a matter of weeks, I was hired as the new editor of American Bee Journal. It was really neat the way it happened, and it was a great thrill for me, and I love what I'm doing. There are days when I wake up and I think I'm an imposter. I have no business being here. Other times I think, hey, I can do this. I'm doing well, and I expect the truth is somewhere between.
Well, that's certainly a noble find. Noble. I mean, it is, to finally love what you do. I wish I could say that all my career I loved everything. I had ups and downs, but enough of that. Diane, what's your beekeeping experience?
It's much better than what it used to be.
Good.
I always have loved bees. I was telling Jim, my grandpa had bees behind his greenhouses, but he would never let us kids get close enough to him, but we saw him buzzing around and pollinating the various plants that he had in the greenhouses. So I've always loved bees. I always wanted to have my own bees in my own yard, and it wasn't until I met Eugene that dream came true. So shortly after we met and I had my own place, he put up a beehive in my own backyard, and then he started training me and showing me, where the queen was and all the everything about
Yeah.
the bees, and
And just like that, you're one of us.
yeah, and then you're hooked. That's it. You
You're
know,
hooked. That's
you're
a good
just
way of putting
hooked.
it. What is it about that hook? You know, there's some people that you could show them bees, and that would just be incentive to get as far away from you and those bees as they could get. And then you show it to the 33rd, the 35th person, and they don't try to get away. They ask more questions. They stand too close. They don't have a veil on while you have a swarm. I've never known my entire life how you find those people, how you separate them from the masses.
What's interesting for me is I grew up with bees. My dad was a beekeeper, and I had no interest in it. And it was just something he kind of did on his own. He didn't really get any of us kids involved in it. And it wasn't until years later when he got out of beekeeping, he was getting up in age and had failing health. Suddenly, I had to buy my honey at the store, and it wasn't the same. So I started talking to my dad about it, and I found out that his dad had been a beekeeper too, and that kind of sealed the deal for me, and suddenly I was hooked on beekeeping.
I became an entomologist before I was a beekeeper, and after I got this bee disease, whatever it is, I went back to my entomology book, to the Hymenoptera chapter, and I looked up bees to see what I wrote, because I was exposed to it during those entomology classes, but nothing sunk. And I had really significant statements like drones or male bees that I had written in the margins, just nothing, just this might be a test question kind of thing. So I can't explain, even in my own personality, why it didn't work then to have worked so well later on. And as a magazine publisher, I don't know how you find the people that within beekeeping are beekeepers enough to want to subscribe to a magazine to read even more. It's like you're selecting from the selected.
People think, well, why would I read a magazine when I can just go to YouTube? And yes, there's a whole lot of good information out there on the internet, but there's also a lot of not so good information out there, and we like to think with both of the magazines that we're kind of separating the wheat from the chaff for people and giving you the information that is pertinent and the information that is accurate.
Well, that makes sense. I've so often wondered when I read or listen to something streaming from YouTube or TikTok that I really know very little about who posted it. There's no addresses, unless you happen to know the individual. What do you do? How do you look for proper information?
I go to Eugene.
Okay, you go to
He is
ABJ.
my number one
What a
resource.
testimonial. Great job.
Smart woman, good answer.
And the second place I go is probably our bee club, Three Rivers Beekeepers. Yeah.
The bee clubs are very important, and we give a bee club discount, in fact, for subscribers. You get a 10% discount if you belong to a beekeeping organization.
Right.
We just always want to encourage that interaction between beekeepers. That's a big part of learning. I always tell people when they talk about jumping into beekeeping and they want my help, I always tell them, you really need to take yourself a workshop, join the local club, and I'd be glad to help you. And of course, subscribe to the magazine.
That's good advice, and I want to comment on that right after we come back from a word from our sponsor.
Swarm season's here. Are you ready? Get the Colorado Bee Vac, made just for Better Bee. The CBV, as beekeepers call it, is the top hive relocation vacuum out there. It's built to gently collect up to 10 pounds of bees with very little loss. Don't miss out. Grab your Colorado Bee Vac today at betterbee.com. That's betterbee.com.
Giving advice is serious work. It needs to be right. And I've often been apprehensive when you're trying to help someone get started and get them going. And I really painfully know entirely too many people who thought they could just get a beehive and put some bees in it and walk away from it and live happily ever after, and then somehow mysteriously get all this free honey and pollination from it, and then nothing worked. I'd get some of the most contorted questions that just made no sense at all. And you don't want to be impolite to those people. They're trying to be beekeepers. They're just doing a bad job of it.
Right.
They try to arrogantly, without saying, well, that was the worst thing you've ever done. Do you have any suggestions on how you answer questions and respond to needy beekeepers?
It can be very frustrating because a lot of people, like you said, they think they can just put bees in a box and they'll do their thing. And unfortunately, there are some suppliers that are out there who suggest the same thing. Oh, just buy our equipment, put some bees in it, and they know what to do, and everything will work out fine. Just go out and get the honey later. And it's very frustrating when people buy into that. But what's really frustrating to me too is it seems like there are some people who really don't want to take the time, or maybe they're just afraid of their bees, but they'll put them in there. You'll go out, you'll help them, look over their shoulder, maybe get in even and do it for them, show them how you work bees and everything, and the next time you talk to them, it's months later. Oh yeah, I haven't been back in the bees, but can you tell me why they're doing this? Well, it's tough to say at this point, but that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is you can't be afraid to get into those bees. You have to keep track of them, especially in the springtime. Things change so quickly.
Yep.
I always have those people who will call me end of April and say, well, I haven't opened my hives yet this year. And my first thought is, uh-oh, because they probably already swarmed at least once, and it's going to be tough to get much production out of them this year. Now, there are a lot of people who are just the opposite. And I really like the people who I'm mentoring that will call me and they'll ask me more informed questions like, I've been doing this with my colony and this is what I'm seeing and I don't understand why that happened, but you know they're involved. They're keeping up with them and they're learning. You know, they might say, I read this here, I saw this there, and why does this person do it this way and somebody else does it another way? I just really love the people who are involved both mentally and physically and taking care of their bees. It's so much easier to mentor someone like that.
I was just thinking that leaves me out on both counts. I'm not mentally or physically able to do very much. I do a nice job sitting in this chair looking at bees. I had a situation a few months ago that I was uncomfortable with. A friend had a friend who was wanting to get bees. Would I help them? Well, I actually did some podcasts on that. I don't mentor well. That's not my thing to go one-on-one. I don't know, too insecure, too busy, too something. And then they kept going. He's also getting chickens and goats. Well, that was just an alarm bell after an alarm bell after an alarm bell. Any one of those is going to be a gracious plenty for 1 year. But if you do all three of those, my brothers had goats, and it's just something to do all the time with goats. And you've got chickens. How much time do you spend with them? Somebody's taking care of them while you're visiting here.
Yes, we hired a little boy down the street for $10 a day to go and check on them and give them some feed and some water. And don't forget the inside birds. We have 2 parakeets too.
I wouldn't have known that.
So, yeah.
Well, I was relieved when the person came back to me and said, never mind, my friend's going to just take up chickens. And he decided to get rabbits instead of goats. And so was I disappointed that this beekeeper didn't pan out? No, I don't think so. This was not going to have a happy ending. What are you doing for photos and that kind of thing? Do you encourage photos for pictures, or do you want people to read your magazine?
I definitely encourage photos. When we have writers, more often than not, will provide their own photos. Sometimes we'll hunt something down. We use stock photos now and then. I like the personal aspect of photos that are taken by the writer to illustrate what they're doing. We also buy cover photos. We are always in the market for good cover photos. We are very, very proud of our covers in ABJ, and so there's a constant market for them. And people, I get a fair amount of photos sent in, and we have specific specifications for them. It has to be 9 by 12 vertical orientation, 300 DPI minimum. Those are specified into our writer's guidelines on the website, but most of the photos that I get in do not match those specifications. Oh. But it's like anything else. You kind of work with the ones you can work with, and a lot of times I'll go back and say, thank you very much. I can't use it for these specific reasons, and they may come back and try again, or they might not.
Well, there goes that answer. I was just about to ask you, are you able to take a photo that's generally too small and do something in Photoshop or wherever and bring it up to speed?
It's tough to do that. I mean, I know there's software now that can try and rescue a photo that's too small and make it into a bigger one, but we're talking about pixels that are, if you've got 100 pixels across on something and you try and turn it into 300 pixels across, you're basically duplicating pixels. You're not getting any of that information that's missing. You can dumb down a photo from a large photo size to a small, but you can't go the other direction without losing quality.
Well, I went through that phase with the Sony Mavic that would make one picture. And I've got about 3 to 4 years of black space in my life where I made nothing but bad pictures, one after the other, even though the camera dependably made them, and it was the early stages of digital photography. It left a hole in my digital life. Tell me what it's like to have to put a schedule together that includes a major, respectable magazine every month. Do you live under constant pressure? Do you get used to the schedule? Never a Christmas off, nothing. You're there on the job every month.
You kind of get used to the schedule, but it can be a challenge. Holidays, you mentioned Christmas, holidays really wreak havoc with the schedule because the printer's deadlines don't change. So if you lose, Christmas falls in the middle of the week, you're losing 2 or 3 days there where nobody's doing anything. Well, you've still got to have that magazine finished by a certain time, and our deadline really gets crunched by 2 or 3 days. Same happens, say, the month of February, you're missing a couple of days there. You still got to get the same amount of work in. So it can get challenging there, but it's really a cyclical job for me because everything just kind of gets compressed into the second half of the month when all these articles are coming in and all these edits have to happen and re-edits and proofing and everything. And once it all gets done and off to the printer and that proof is approved, then I can breathe for a few days. And if I need to run somewhere, if we want to take a short vacation or something like that, that's when we do it, is that first part of the month before things start to build up and go crazy again.
Well, it sounds intensive to me. I don't know that I could do it. I've tried to do just monthly newsletters, and for the first 3 months, I was just on fire. But then you miss a month, and once you miss a month, it immediately becomes addictive. So I don't think there's going to be any kind of editorship role in my life.
Yeah, when I mentioned the journalism thing, that was another thing that I decided I didn't like was deadlines. I like to write, but I don't like writing on a deadline. So it's difficult, and I probably shouldn't say this and within earshot of my writers, but I'm not fond of deadlines. I have to enforce them.
Yeah, well, don't tell your writers that because they struggle with deadlines too.
And I'll tell you one other thing. That little editorial I put in the front of the magazine is usually the last thing that's done.
Oh, okay. Just under the wire.
So if you want to find a typo in the magazine, that's also the best place to look.
That's where you have your little adrenaline inspirational spurge to get that done. That's what you're down to. Listeners, I've been visiting here in a sunny afternoon in my bee yard, which I don't usually take visitors to, but they have promised that they wouldn't take any pictures back here. I've been visiting with Eugene and Diane Makovec from the American Bee Journal. It's been a nice visit. I can tell you that I'm not going to become a magazine editor. Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Tim.
I had a good time, and thanks for giving me a break and letting them hear someone besides me. Next week, you're back to me. So, sorry, good things don't last. I'll talk to you next week, listeners.